Our anime today begins with Kazami Yuuji, who studies in Yamanashi Prefecture. Our protagonist was moving to a new city and was questioned about it, but he still doesn't know where he will live, and the police think he is a criminal. However, they received a call from the special organization and were told to release our protagonist. As he left, a girl was waiting for him, surprised at how quickly he got away from the police. The protagonist simply said that he doesn't cooperate with the police, which surprised the girl. Later we see them arriving at the school where the protagonist will study. The girl who went to pick him up turns out to be the principal, Tachibana Chizuru, and she welcomes him to the school. The protagonist had questions because the school was empty, and Chizuru responded by saying that only the elite are in this school, so there are only 6 students. They then talk about the dormitories, which apparently the 6 students share. But finally, Yuuji asks if this school is ordinary. The principal says yes, and she remembers that he asked to be in one, but due to the protagonist's abilities and circumstances, there is no other ordinary school where he can be accepted. Then they go to the rooms, where they have a bathroom and kitchen, as well as the necessary furniture. Afterward, the boy is left alone with a maid, but she initially thinks he is a stalker. This girl's name is Komine. However, the principal quickly resolves that misunderstanding. Komine is the class representative for the first year, and that's why she helps the teachers as a maid. That's how she ended up wearing the outfit. She's simply a good and helpful girl. Then the boy is guided by her to his room, where we see that everything is quite normal, and they give each other nicknames. From now on, we'll refer to her as Saki. Then we move on to the next day, where the protagonist starts his day with a routine of running in the mornings and then having breakfast, something he has been doing since he lived in the mountains. According to his teacher, he had to be fast, know how to defend himself, and be intelligent. All of that made our protagonist think that she was a very sweet person to him. After leaving his room following this routine, he encounters 2 girls who are very exhibitionist. The girls quickly realize that he is the new student, so now we are introduced to So Amane and Arisu Makina. Later, as the protagonist walks through the school, he finds a girl singing, who turns out to belong to the theater club. She refused to act and then introduced herself as Matsuhima Michiru, who was nervous in front of the new student. She said that if Yuuji needs help with anything, he can count on her. Although later Michiru acts conceitedly and feels uncomfortable with Yuuji, who only has one expression. The girl is very rude and treats everything as if it were a performance. And she admits it. The protagonist even realizes that she wants attention and even dyes her hair. The girl feels embarrassed by how he acts, but she continues to act tsundere, and after that, the protagonist waits for classes. The other girls arrive, and the rude one continues to cause a terrible mess in the classroom and makes Saki cry because she told her not to call her Michiru-sama anymore. There was still one more student named Sakari, but she didn't show up. Then Saki shows the whole school to the protagonist, who is still intrigued by the last girl. Without even waiting for a chapter, Saki almost confesses in everything, but the protagonist doesn't notice anything and says he must stay on guard. Wandering around the school, we see that the remaining girl is reading. Her name is Sakari Yumiko, and the protagonist introduces himself to her, but the girl looks at him in a murderous way and even tries to stab him with a knife. They introduced themselves in such a friendly manner. Later, the protagonist returns to the place where the rooms are located and realizes that nobody has tasks and doubts what the girls are doing. Undoubtedly, this guy is quite lucky. When he enters his room, he finds Amane completely naked and thinks something more will happen. You know what I mean. The girl starts laughing at the protagonist's reaction because he doesn't act very surprised and says that she always changes there. The protagonist continues to act as if nothing happened when he sees her, but finally, after having a drink, he compliments her. A little later, the girl asks him if he has a sister since he acts as if it's nothing to see her naked, but the protagonist responded that he lost his entire family. Amane apologizes upon hearing that, but it doesn't affect the protagonist, and she asks him his name, and the name of the protagonist's sister was Kazuki. Amane said she was just asking out of curiosity but reacted with surprise to what he said. The girl kept trying to seduce the protagonist, but it didn't work, and they moved on to talking about what he would have for dinner. Frustrated, she says that her sister will make dinner for him and leaves. Although the protagonist still isn't used to what she says. After that, he realizes that he locked the door, and he doesn't know how the girl entered the room. It turns out she picked the lock with a lockpick. Amane had witnessed the death of the protagonist's little sister, and then it jumps to Saki making a gadget, and later on the rooftop, we see Yumiko wanting to confront the protagonist and not accepting him. At that moment, the protagonist receives a call telling him that he's doing a good job. Yuuji had a sniper rifle in his room, and that's how we move on to the next day. Yumiko, without warning, tries to stab the protagonist in the back, but he easily dodges her attack. In this way, the girl says that she hasn't killed anyone yet. Amane says that all of this is happening because he got close to this crazy girl too quickly, and as she says this, she touches him with her feet, but that annoys Yuuji. The protagonist says that his senses sharpen whenever needed, and his companion tells him that he will never have a girlfriend that way. In this way, she reveals that she also lives with her teacher. Later, Yuuji reads books under the sun, although he suffers from the heat. Then he finds Makina sleeping and, for a few seconds, he thinks she's dead, but he realizes she slept there because it was a pleasant place. The girl doesn't even notice that he's following her when she wakes up. Later, she tries to catch a lobster and almost falls into the water. The protagonist arrives just in time and prevents her from falling, so the girl is grateful. Afterward, our protagonist notices that she avoids him, so he starts calling her Oni-chan to build trust. Then the protagonist catches the lobster and tells her that if she doesn't eat certain things for a month, she can turn blue. The girl wants to do it, and after that, he teaches her how to fish all afternoon, and they become closer. Makina later gives him an apple, but the girl with the knives watches them. By the way, she went to talk to the principal because she thought Yuuji would violate each of them when she found out he had been enrolled. That's why she started skipping classes and used everything she knew to gather information about him. She noticed that his information was contradictory, so she doesn't trust him. The next day, Yumiko's attempted murder was repeated, and the others saw it as a game because she couldn't harm him. In this way, she was exposed to the entire class and left disgusted by Michiru's gaze. The others started joking that she would be charged with blood for being a peeping Tom. Later, the protagonist went to talk to the principal, and she told him that he must feel like an intruder in the class, and that's why Yumiko attacks him. Yumiko had never attended school with boys before, so she must feel out of place, or so the principal thinks. The protagonist wants to know how to solve the problem, but the principal changes the subject. In this way, the protagonist responds to her question, saying that he feels like a spy in the class, but he feels uncomfortable, and he also thinks that he is not the same when he sees himself smile in the reflection. The principal tells him that all of them said the same thing when they arrived and that everyone has a past that cannot be publicly known. Later, when he is alone, the protagonist wonders how to adapt after losing everything. Suddenly, Makina appears next to him and follows him. Their relationship went from distant to quite close. Later, the protagonist tells her a story he heard at his previous school. On another occasion, we see that Amane is surprised at how close these two have become, and she believes she should do the same with Sakari, although she always tries to stab him, so it's difficult. Amane insists that she is a good person since she recently helped many people by doing volunteer work. Outside the school, there was a car with a woman calling for Yuuji, so the other two girls went ahead while the protagonist stepped out for a moment. The woman asked him how his school life was going, to which the protagonist said there were no problems. He said that his problem is her. The protagonist says that she brings lies, so she jokingly threatens him a little, and then she leaves. The woman actually only came to talk to Yuuji. She was frustrated about the police incident because he was detained because he didn't take the train at her insistence, and the higher-ups reprimanded her. The protagonist apologizes to her and proceeds to leave after that. Her name is Julia Barbera or JB, and she says she's a woman who only causes problems for the protagonist. Now Yuuji thinks about how to explain everything to his angry classmates, and he says that she is his boss, which calms the situation. He explains that he gets rid of the trash and does the dirty work, while she is in administration and doesn't dirty her hands. In this way, classes began, but before that, Amane asked him if she was his girlfriend. To calm everything down, the protagonist says that he's not the type of person with a girlfriend. Amane continues to ask what he did before coming to the school. To that, the protagonist says that he lived with a person who took care of him and was a friend of that woman. Amane feels more at ease knowing everything, and Michiru continues with her typical tsundere act. In the afternoon, Sakari tries to surprise attack the protagonist when no one is in the rooms, but he uses excessive force to defend himself and apologizes. She gets scared, but Yuuji says he won't hurt her, and they are not enemies. He asks her to think better about things because if she stabs him, it will be too late to regret something. So she proceeds to ask about his weaknesses, although she doesn't get any results. In this way, they start having a strange conversation to begin becoming friends, and Yuuji suggests that they use each other's surnames to build trust. They mutually say that it's a pleasure, and it seems that things will calm down. Then we see Yumiko thinking about everything, about the arrival of the others. Another day starts, and the protagonist continues with his routine, but he catches Amane entering his room. She wanted to wake Yuuji up by giving him a kiss, but this disturbs him a bit because he's always on guard. She says that everything is a mess and smells the protagonist's clothes. This girl is somewhat obsessive to the point that she starts smelling the protagonist's bed and begins to pleasure herself. She is an irredeemable pervert, and the protagonist stops worrying about it. Amane feels embarrassed, but the protagonist says that at least he didn't rub the pillow against his crotch, which puts him at ease. After that, the two of them and Makina run to school while singing that Amane is a bitch who indulges in men's bedsheets. Later in the classroom, they think about what to have for breakfast. Saki goes to fetch everything, and Amane complains about how Makina copies everything the protagonist does. The protagonist talks to her about it and follows his advice, but not the others. Then Amane and Makina leave to prepare things for class. After that, Yumiko says that Amane used to be very different because she had a traffic accident, which we saw earlier. When Amane returns, Saki still hasn't returned. She went to fetch milk from the field like a complete madwoman. Yumiko says that no one there is normal, including the protagonist. During the break, we see that the protagonist heard Michiru doing something and scolded her, but it was a misunderstanding. She was being chased by a kitten. She asked him for help to return it to where it came from, but the protagonist refused. The protagonist gave her a hint that the smell of citrus bothers cats, and she had grape shampoo, so she used her hair to scare away the kitten. Thus, the fierce battle between the kitten and this tsundere girl began, creating a super strange scene, and the cat scratched her head but suddenly escaped. Later, we see that due to lack of sleep, the protagonist said something to Saki without realizing it, and it seemed to cause problems. So the girl took Yuji's measurements to make him a shark fanny pack, and now he wonders what the hell he did, but it's too late. Let's recap the situation. The protagonist was still with Michiru, who had a shark fanny pack, and Saki appeared as if summoned to fix it. The protagonist said something foolish without thinking when she mentioned the fanny pack, and he went into NPC mode. Due to lack of sleep, the protagonist unknowingly asked Saki for a fanny pack, although Michiru had a feeling about what the protagonist did. But Saki insisted that he wouldn't do that. The protagonist kept repeating the same thing, and eventually agreed to let Saki make a fanny pack for him, and of the best quality. Now the protagonist has to wear the fanny pack, but Saki says it's almost finished, so the protagonist tells her he wants it to be made from a raccoon dog, animals that can run in reverse. The protagonist wanted to avoid her making the fanny pack, but she says she can make it in 20 minutes. In this way, Saki quickly cooks and the protagonist starts throwing a tantrum about needing more sleep. At that moment, Saki and Makina arrived. Now the protagonist has to wear the fanny pack and he's not happy about it, but he still thanks the girl. To save the protagonist from the situation, Michiru convinces Makina to keep it. Saki wasn't convinced, but the protagonist told her to let Makina keep it, and she agreed. Makina was happy because the fanny pack even made sounds. Yuji thanked Yuji for what she did. Later, Amane hurt herself playing baseball, and the protagonist took her to the infirmary. There, she reproaches him for being so cold and asks if he's ashamed of helping others. Amane asks a moment later to be his girlfriend and claims it was love at first sight. She says she fell in love with him because she thinks he's defenseless. He likes girls like her, but he doesn't seem convinced to be in a relationship, so she wants to be his sister. Amane offered to be his kind older sister, but Yuji continues to reject the ideas. But as she says she will lose trust, he lets her act as his sister. In this way, she starts treating him as such. The next day, the girl made lunch for the protagonist, but he still asks her why she pays him so much attention. She says she only does it to comfort her feelings for him. Afterward, she fed him. But the protagonist felt suffocated because since his teacher died, he tried not to get close to anyone, but he wasn't satisfied with that life he had, and now he seems happier. The next day, Yuji sees Michiru on the coast, marveling at how big the sea is, and looking for her kitten, although she denies it constantly. Then they decided to give the cat a name, although the protagonist wanted to give it a strange name. Afterwards, they sat down to appreciate the sky, and Michiru fears the lack of light at night. The girl wanted to die but hid her true feelings, but then she asks the obvious question to the protagonist: what does someone feel when they die? Later, they meet at the residence while the protagonist remembers that moment and told her that it's like sleeping forever. Then Michiru asks him to promise that if she dies, he will bury her on the coast. Returning to the present, they had a silly argument, then they separated after a discussion about whether vitamin C makes you smarter. At night, they wonder what's happening with Michiru with the question she asked the protagonist. They also say that she acts foolishly to disguise that everything is fine. After a lightning strike, the girls go to sleep, and there's a power outage. They start hearing screams. It seems that Michiru is the one screaming. She was sleepwalking, apparently. Without any further concern, Yumiko goes to sleep, and Saki knows that the girl does that frequently while crying and dancing strangely. The next day, the protagonist says he has something to do and ignores the girls. At the same time, Yumiko is about to leave, but first, Amane conducts a survey on whether men and women can be friends, but she says she has no experience in that before leaving. Just then, Michiru arrives and gives her opinion, saying she's not sure, and then she leaves again. The protagonist notices something strange in her behavior. The girl has a strong chest pain, which he noticed when he caught up with her at the school fountain. However, the tsundere doesn't want help from the protagonist, but he follows her to the coast. Michiru starts saying that she wishes to die in code, but the protagonist doesn't understand. Then Michiru continues, saying that her health improves and she only rests with her kitten. The protagonist wonders if she's the Michiru he knows, but she tells him to ignore that and brings up their last conversation in that place. They continue talking about death and what would happen if you come back every day after thinking it's the end. Then the protagonist says that people don't live alone and everything has a cost. The girl tries to change the subject, and that's when the protagonist asks her to go to the dormitories, but before that, Michiru asks him if he has a lover. She wanted to have one, and she asked him what it's like to have a kiss. The protagonist gave a somewhat simple answer, and the girl asked if she could try it. Yuuji agreed, and she did it. In this way, she was somewhat surprised, and Meikyuu returned to acting as she usually would and started eating grass. Meikyuu didn't remember anything about the situation and wondered if she did something strange, but the protagonist told her that she always acts strange. The next day, Meikyuu was talking to Yumiko while reading. The blonde claimed to be a great athlete, and they had a little fight. While that was happening, the protagonist reflected on the events of the previous day. The protagonist admitted what he thought of her, that what he did the previous day doesn't make sense, but she doesn't remember it. However, the protagonist said it using a word she doesn't know, leaving her confused. Meikyuu was nowhere near the answer, so Yuuji asked her if she wanted him to repeat it so she could understand. In this way, the protagonist approached and tried to kiss the tsundere for her to understand. Meikyuu ran away outside and didn't want to see the kitten, but she regretted scaring it away. Later, she saw Yuuji and was embarrassed. She named the kitten Mihama. As it was getting dark, the protagonist said they should go back, but the girl wanted to apologize to her cat. She felt that her kitten is like her best friend. So, both of them returned to the academy, but the protagonist momentarily separated from Meikyuu. Someone had run over Meikyuu's kitten, and she felt terrible. Now they took a taxi and wanted to save the badly injured kitten's life. In the car, she cried, and the kitten slowly died in her arms, creating a very sad moment. Sometime later, Yuuji entered Meikyuu's room and discovered that she was using drugs. She still felt terrible about what happened to the kitten. Days later, she was better, but the protagonist remained concerned about her mood. Saki was happy that she was doing better, although she doesn't know the true version. Amane and Makina then appeared, and the latter wanted to play with Yuuji, but he was focused on Meikyuu, who still wasn't doing well. Meikyuu now had a single personality and no longer had two. The lively and somewhat clumsy Meikyuu was buried after the kitten's death. The protagonist doesn't understand what she means by single, and she clarified what she meant. In the afternoon, Saki approached Yuuji and gave him a box that Meikyuu had given her. Meikyuu didn't want to see that box again. However, Saki brought a saw to open the box but regretted it because she thought it would be wrong to break it. In this way, she entrusted the box to Yuuji, who opened it after the caretaker left. That way, he saw the contents and went to talk to Meikyuu. The protagonist read the girl's diary, where she wrote that a personality transplant was done by transferring a heart to her body. The protagonist is surprised by this, but he believes everything he read. However, the original Meikyuu doesn't want to come back, and the one originally in another body refuses to let her return. She is sad about the decision of her other consciousness, but the original Meikyuu doesn't want to continue after what happened. However, they both want to do something to bring her back, but the girl occupying her body doesn't want to continue without her other part. In this way, Yuuji wants to interfere in this, and he gives her the pills that the original used to suppress the one currently controlling the body. Yuuji wants to bring her back, even if it puts his friend's life at risk, and he asks her about her feelings. Meikyuu wants to die. She no longer wants to lose anyone else. In this way, the protagonist tells her that he will kill her with the box to end her world. He was preparing a grave for her to bury her in the place she desired. She will die in the world she wanted, inside a box underground. Then we see a girl playing the piano who feels useless. She wanted to die by jumping off the school roof, but a living person stopped her. Then another girl told her it wouldn't be fair for her to die. That's how they met, both girls now sharing the same body and experiencing many moments together. But time passed, and Meikyuu's friend committed suicide in front of her. In that way, since she was going to die due to her weak heart, she received her friend's heart, who told her not to worry, as she would take care of her weaknesses. In this way, Meikyuu attempted suicide when another personality appeared in her mind. We return to the present, and Meikyuu screams for Yuuji's help. She wants to live and doesn't want to lose anyone else. At that moment, Meikyuu remembered her past in rehabilitation, where she pretended to be happy with a clumsy character. But Yuuji arrived and changed that. So in Meikyuu's mind, her torn-apart friend appeared and invaded her mind. Meikyuu felt terrified by her best friend who haunted her memories, all due to the trauma of her childhood. However, she knew she had to leave the past behind by saying goodbye to her friend and her kitten. In this way, she emerged from the grave where she was buried. Meikyuu came out 3 days later from the tomb. Yuuji knew that she wanted to continue living, and he would wait as long as necessary, not considering the possibility of her death. Yuuji stayed by her side for the 3 days because he couldn't leave her alone and eat. Meikyuu, happy to be alive, hugged Yuuji. However, she asked him what he would do if she were to die again. The protagonist said he never gave her drugs, they were candies. This made her see her will to live. Meikyuu now planned to confess to the protagonist, but she didn't do it and they returned to the academy together. While they were driving, Meikyuu was surprised to see where Yuuji was taking her. In this way, Yuuji took her to see her parents. She approached her parents' house, and there was an unknown woman. The information was provided by someone the protagonist knew. The other Meikyuu didn't return after this, although she still occasionally acts like a foolish tsundere. Later, they made a grave for the kitten, and Michiru's acceptance story ended this way. Now we move on to Sakari's past, and she was mocked because she was an unwanted daughter. This caused her anger towards her false friends, and she cut her hand with a scalpel. She still hasn't erased that from her mind today. Yumiko, on the other hand, is stable in the present, and two agents were discussing the situation. However, this guy was trying to scare Yumiko by any means necessary to calm her down. Now we return to the academy, and they are playing Monopoly. The situation was calm among everyone. However, Yumiko went in another direction, and Yuuji went after her. Yumiko then asks him why he does that to our protagonist, and he was sent to protect her by JB. Then we see Yumiko drawing while talking to Yuuji, and she says that she doesn't like talking to others, which is why she does it. Suddenly it started raining, and we see that she has her scalpel as always. Suddenly, some men appeared, intending to scare the girl, but they didn't know about the student's reflexes, so after he defended her, they ran away. Yumiko was shocked and very scared, so she hugged Yuuji and asked why he was so strong. Although he doesn't see himself that way, Yumiko feels weak and reveals that her father wanted a boy instead of a girl. Since her mother couldn't have more children, they separated them. Because of that, she became physically and emotionally weak to the point that she was hospitalized. Yumiko's mother was alone, and she couldn't make friends. Her mother no longer smiled even though Yumiko visited her every day. One day, her mother disappointed her by saying that she should have been a boy. This devastated the poor girl, and she cut her hair in the middle of a crisis. Her father had another child with someone else, and Yumiko's mother fell into such depression that she took her own life. All of that traumatized her, but her brother also died, and her father went to look for her as if nothing had happened, seeking to make her the heir. But people looked at her with disdain all the time, and she recounted hurting her schoolmate with the razor blade. And the school she is in was created by her father to isolate her, and she doesn't feel that she has any value as a human being. She apologized to the protagonist for telling him all of this. After that, Yuuji and Yumiko returned to the school, and the girl's father said he would transfer her to a school in the United States and close the current school they were in. The director informed Yumiko about this, and they would expel Yuuji if he refused to change schools. Yumiko went to her room after that and called her father, and everyone outside her room was worried because they wanted to talk to her. But suddenly her father appeared at the entrance of the school. Yuuji then confronted the father, but he claimed to be the owner and wanted to force Yumiko to come with him. Michiru got angry with the girl's father, who said he had a full schedule and couldn't spare any time to let his daughter think. The man became angry with Michiru and everyone there. But suddenly, the daughter of the businessman came down to confront him, saying she would take Yumiko with her. However, Yumiko had a weapon and asked those men to speak. The boys took refuge in the school, and Yumiko confronted her father for what he did to her and her mother. She wants nothing to do with him. She doesn't want to become someone like her father. Then Yumiko's father approached her, regardless of the fact that his daughter had a gun. She shot him in the shoulder and refused to get close to him, but she ran out of bullets, and the special forces advanced. Although Yumiko had a grenade and considered taking her own life if necessary, she asked them to imagine that she never existed, apologizing to him in that final moment for what she had just done. The girl was completely devastated, and her father screamed upon seeing the body. The special forces called for an ambulance, and we see the girl's grave as her father mourns. Yuuji was there and thanked the father for not closing the academy, but he didn't understand the reason. It was all because a note she left him in his room, and it touched the man's heart. Finally, the girl's father was proud of her. In this way, he left, but it turned out that Yumiko was hiding in the place and said she still hated her family, although she was happy to be her parents' daughter. Thus, the girl bid farewell to her father. Then we see how the protagonist planned with the agents, who were on his side. Yuuji helped him with everything so that his friend could live the life she wanted. The bullets were real, but the protagonist fired them with a sniper rifle from another location. There were still problems in executing the whole protocol, but Yumiko could be at peace now. She now trusts Yuuji and is happier. She is also grateful for everything. Another day began. Now it was the weekend, and Saki was cleaning while Michiru acted sillier than usual. The redhead feels that everything is because of Yuuji. Later, she appeared behind him and believed that surely everyone became attached to him because he did something good. Although she isn't happy and thinks that maybe she should change, Makina suddenly appears and interrupts her thoughts. Saki started counting numbers in the bathroom until she felt so bad that she almost drowned. It turns out she got a fever from wanting to count up to 10,000. Akane and Makina took care of her in that way. While Saki was sleeping, she mentioned the nickname she gave to Yuuji. The next day, Saki was feeling better and apologized for worrying everyone. Yuuji had left the school to investigate something while everyone else was in class. In that way, Yuuji observed the games at a park and learned that Saki was a childhood friend. At the school, Michiru asked Saki to get rid of the exams, and she agreed. When Yuuji arrived at the academy, Saki was taking care of that. The girls were still worried about what happened to Saki in the bathroom, so the protagonist will take care of talking to her. Before going to her dormitory, Yumiko told him if he knew about the girl who set fire to a school to avoid an exam and asked him not to let Saki do anything dangerous. The protagonist asked Yumiko for help in case things got out of control. Meanwhile, Saki thought she must be a good girl and has a mask to breathe with gases. At night, she took notes from the school and couldn't sleep well. Yuuji clearly observed everything, and Saki prepared chemicals and gas to start a fire. On the day before the exam, Saki didn't show up, and at night, she placed jerry cans throughout the area. She prepared explosives for the right moment, but at night, the girls went there because Yuuji asked them to accompany her. In this way, Saki accidentally triggered the explosives while she was with her friends. Saki urgently asked to leave the place and didn't understand why the others did too, but Yumiko noticed everything and asked Saki to leave urgently. Because of Meikyuu, the dynamite was exposed, and Saki threw herself over it and asked them to run, but the countdown reached 0 and nothing happened. Just then, Yuuji arrived, and the protagonist asked for a silly topic to talk about to be alone with Saki for a moment. He had modified the explosive so that nothing would happen when the countdown reached 0, thus avoiding a catastrophe. Saki was so scared that she wet herself, and when she was able to change, the protagonist said he remembered her. Her nickname was Sakin, and her parents died in an accident when she was little. Her parents worked so much in the factory they owned that they couldn't give her attention. During that time, she met the protagonist and thought they were similar, but over time, Yuuji disappeared. On her 10th birthday, Saki took out her anger on her parents because they paid attention to her after a long time, even though she knows she was wrong to do that. While she was at the park, her parents were looking for her, but a truck ended their lives, leaving her with such a traumatic image that she fainted. Her parents remained in a coma, and she feels that she must fulfill everything and be a good girl because of that. The last time they saw each other, she brought happiness to Yuuji, who was depressed, and he was grateful that she gave him happiness. After saying that, Yuuji tells Saki that she wasn't wrong, she was just a child, and surely it has been tough for her until now. The protagonist wants to do something to show his gratitude for what she did for him years ago, and she cried in his arms. Now Yuuji plans to erase all evidence, so the explosives exploded, using fireworks as camouflage. The day after that, Yuuji went to visit the factory where Sachi's parents worked. Her father was dead, but her mother was still alive. On her birthday, her mother left her a letter in the workshop, thanking her for being her daughter. Saki started crying and was grateful to her parents. She plans to visit her comatose mother from now on. On their way back, Saki asked Yuuji for a hug. Now we change the situation. Makina left a message for the protagonist saying that Yuuji was now her father. To this, he asked for an explanation because he didn't understand anything. She asked him to be her father at that moment. Now, in front of everyone, Yuuji claimed to be Makina's father, but nobody understood anything. Their game had reached a very strange level. The girl gave him a check for 70 million for that purpose, and it turns out she has a political family. So, the protagonist discusses the matter with his coworker, who is afraid that he will ask her to marry him in the future. Yuuji knows he can't let the matter pass. She is the oldest daughter, and the organization is linked to her supposedly deceased father. So, the protagonist asked her for documents to see what to do. That's when the girl threw him to the ground and kissed him twice. FBI, come here. Akane caught them right then. Later, we see the protagonist talking to the director who provided the information. The maternal side was involved in corruption, so Makina's father was going to send the information to intelligence. But he was killed before he could do that. After a kidnapping, Makina was disinherited because she is physically weak, and everything was left to her sister. Later, when they gather with the girls who are planting apple trees, Makina wants them to grow to give apples to the protagonist. Later on, we see that the vacation begins for everyone, and they are happy about it. The protagonist has a strict routine for Makina and plans to train her. The girl is fast, but Yuuji surpasses her by a lot. Amane and Yumiko were talking, and it turns out Yuuji ordered something online. Yuuji then taught Makina how to use a sniper rifle, and although she missed the first shot, she hit the target with the second one. But Yumiko was in the area. Yumiko was surprised to see them practicing shooting and preferred to play chess instead of participating. However, Makina insulted the other girl, telling her to shut her mouth. Then we see that Amane will travel by train, but Makina will stay with Yuuji. She asks him if he will go home when they are in the dormitories, but the protagonist only has a grave to visit. That grave belongs to his teacher and is located in the mountains, so they plan to go there on the same day. They went there on Amane's motorcycle, and on the way, Makina asked what kind of person his teacher was. He responded by saying that he met her 5 years ago when his family died. His teacher was an assassin, simply put, but she killed criminals. That's when he moved to the mountains because of her work. Additionally, he spent some time in the United States and learned how to survive upon his return. So, she was practically like a mother to him. Once they arrived at the house, which turned out to be a cabin, they saw that JB had been there recently. The protagonist then gave Makina eye drops, but before she used them, she saw a photo. In the photo, the protagonist didn't feel anything yet, but his teacher lifted his spirits and gave him a reason to live. Yuuji still feels indebted to her for everything his teacher did. There, at the grave, he introduced Makina. When she fell asleep at night, Yuuji called Saki. After that, he also called JB and reported on how things were going. The next day, Makina was walking down the street, and when she saw her sister, she hid. Both girls had different mothers, and Makina's sister, Serena, didn't know about her until the day of the kidnapping. As they passed by each other, Makina felt happy, but the car her little sister got into exploded. Later, Makina was unconscious since the explosion, and Yumiko took care of her, but Yuji was in charge of her. Before leaving, Yumiko told him to investigate what happened in the family. Then the protagonist remembered how Makina gave him the check, and he accepted it, but on the condition that he would do things his way. He promised to protect her at all costs. Now, Yuji has a bad feeling. When Makina woke up, she asked about Serena, who barely survived. Furthermore, Yuji told her that she wouldn't die and that he wouldn't let her, and Makina cried herself to sleep. Later, Yuji met with JB, and a girl named Kiera asked him about others like him, but JB made the girl leave. JB gave Yuji a murder file, and he said that he won't kill anyone else, but Makina is a target for assassination, and that's why he showed him the file. Now we see the kidnapping of Makina, and there her father was beaten and shot because he was going to expose the family's corruption. Makina witnessed this, and the person who ordered the hit on the girl's father was none other than her mother, who had a lover at the time. That's how the girl's father died. When Makina woke up, she was with Yuji and started crying. At JB's agency, they already knew that the protagonist escaped with Makina, so he had to lie and say that he betrayed them. Furthermore, they started chasing after him, and JB betrayed his trust. After that, we see what happened, and she asked him to kill Makina, or else he would be taken into custody. In that way, Yuji falsely agreed and started to escape. After seeing that, we see that before they left, they told the others that they were going into hiding, and the girls gave them different things to show their support before they left. That's how they distanced themselves, and Makina thinks she's going to die, but Yuji promised that he wouldn't let anything happen to her. Yumiko then bid farewell from the rooftop of the school. When they arrived at the commercial zone, JB was there, and the protagonist said that he wouldn't reveal where they were going. Her family didn't want her alive because she knows the secret of the Arisu family's corruption, all thanks to her great memory. The protagonist thinks it's hard to believe, and JB says that he is putting himself at risk by protecting the girl. After that, she left, but Yuji apologized for worrying her. Then we see the scene of the girl's father's death, where Makina spent days in front of the corpse and couldn't understand that he was dead. Finally, she felt that he had lied to her. The next day, Yuji woke up Makina, and they heard screams from the room next door, which angered her. Makina then asked what he was doing, and the boy was setting traps for the men who wanted to kill her, calculating their reaction time. At night, they located Yuji's hiding place, but JB had a bad feeling. Clearly, Yuji was hiding. They both hid in a freezer. When they entered the room that appeared to be trapped, they didn't find them, and they even fell into an explosive trap. They believed that they were still inside, and they were right that they were close. Yuji escaped in a van and bought them some time. However, Makina wanted to go back for the apple tree they left behind, but Yuji promised her that they would retrieve it. Now, survival was the priority. We go back to JB, who is looking at a file, and it's a letter requesting the return of the tree. During the night, they were attacked again in the same area where they were attacked before, all because they went to retrieve the tree. Makina got separated from Yuji and, after confronting a guard, she was shot. Makina instantly fell and was being punished in the same way as her father. When Yuji arrived, he said that she wouldn't die, she would endure it, and he promised to take her to the hospital. JB was waiting for Yuji at the exit, and he had to hand her over. At the hospital, Makina's mother appeared and was interested in making her the heir. Serena was in critical condition, and she planned to use Makina to give her sister another chance. Everything was out of control internally, and Yuji disguised himself as a delivery person, threatening Makina's mother, who pleaded for mercy after being shot, but Yuji killed that heartless woman. Now JB has evidence of what Makina knows, and the corruption is a fact. Now, the organization has a long blacklist to pursue, and they guarantee Makina's safety. They also erased all information about Yuji and his service. After what happened with the Arisu family, Yuji can continue his life with the others at the academy. Everyone was waiting for them with great joy upon their return. Now we change scenes. Yuji is with JB, and a woman is waiting for Yuji in his room, or so she told him before leaving. She kissed him. Saki happened to see the scene and didn't know what to say. Yuji tells her it's a misunderstanding, but Saki continues to think the worst. She even proposes that he kiss her to prove that she won't reveal what she saw. And then she starts saying strange things, and the protagonist tells her to leave. When he arrived in his room, Amane was waiting for Yuji, ironing his clothes. She fixed his clothes, and then she tried to tempt him to do something, but Yuji simply ignores her and goes to take a shower. Amane keeps insisting because she has genuine feelings for Yuji. That's how Amane cooked for him, but she received a message from Saki, and when she saw the photo, she became jealous and asked for an explanation. Yuji was hoping that she would ask him, but she didn't say anything. Amane tells him that she will forgive him if he kisses her. He agrees, and she feels that it was very sudden, although she actually wanted it. She is surprised because it's her first time, but Yuji lies and says it's his first time too, and that he will be more careful next time. Amane thinks he kisses her for fun, but Yuuji says it's because he has feelings for her and will try to reciprocate them, although he doesn't promise to be there for her forever. Amane then asks if they can be a couple, but Yuuji asks her not to cry and forget about him within a year if he dies. If she agrees, they can be a couple, but she asks Yuuji if he likes her before that. Yuuji says he doesn't fully understand his feelings but will try to figure it out, and he believes that he likes her. Amane is happy about all of this, and they become a couple. Amane still can't believe it. She even gives him permission to sleep together now, but Yuuji tells her that she's rushing things. Yuuji wants to know why she wants to be so close to him. Amane tells him it's because of love and starts crying. He asks her for the real reason. She begins to speak and reveals that she knew Yuji's sister. They were both in the basketball club. When they returned from a training camp 6 years ago, a tire on their car exploded, causing them to swerve off the road. It caused the vehicle to fall, but it seemed like Yuji's sister, Kazuki, was fine after the fall. After the accident, they introduced themselves but never spoke before. In this way, both of them got out of the crashed vehicle. Yuji's sister was very serious and asked Amane, if you had to save someone, who would you save first? Amane replied that she would save the student council president because she hated her. In this way, she wanted to save the person she disliked the most first. Slowly, they rescued all the girls and the teacher, but one girl was seriously injured. However, all of them were in shock. They didn't know what to do in that situation, but Kazuki wanted to take charge of everything, while the student council president opposed her taking charge. In this way, Amane and Kazuki explored the area, but their phones had no signal, and the compass didn't work. They were in a location from which they couldn't easily escape. There were 4 injured among them, and Kazuki was going to take care of the injured because she had read many books and preferred to try to do something. Kazuki started by attending to the simpler cases and then the more serious ones. Kazuki was very rude to everyone, and Amane tried to calm things down. Finally, after treating everyone, Amane said that the girl with the leg fractures was the most severe case. Now they would report everything to the student council president, but Kazuki's arm was injured. Amane was nervous and said that she would do any favor for Kazuki since she accidentally fell on her injured arm. But Kazuki said she would ask for the favor later. The teacher woke up and didn't know how everything happened. Kazuki thought they were lucky to be alive, but they couldn't wait because they had no food or water. The student council president refused to follow Kazuki's idea, and the teacher covered the body of one of the girls who had died. They then distributed the resources, and at night, Amane was nervous. Nevertheless, Kazuki was calm, and they went to sleep. The first night passed, and they didn't know what to do. Now the second day began, and Kazuki had already woken up and gone somewhere. Amane was looking for her. Kazuki had gone to search for food and take care of her needs. She thought that they wouldn't be able to leave within 3 days. Kazuki was surprised that Amane worried about her, but she promised not to leave or let her be alone. A girl said that Kazuki was depressive, but in reality, she was taking care of the injured girls. Kazuki was taking care of them. They divided tasks among themselves. Suddenly, Kazuki thought that Amane didn't want to be with her, but Amane admitted that she was the one she liked the most. Kazuki felt embarrassed about all this and fell into the water because of Amane. Suddenly, a helicopter passed by, but they didn't notice them. Amane tried to honk the bus horn to get their attention, but the helicopter never returned. The teacher took the bodies of the deceased girls because they were decomposing. Later, Kazuki talked about her brother and said that he was considered a disappointment, and they always compared them. Amane started crying because she wanted to go home, and Kazuki promised to take her there. The days passed, and they rationed the food. Days later, the situation was not calm for those who were worse off, and they had been there for a week. Kazuki asked the person in charge to be more considerate. One of the girls didn't want to eat and felt ashamed because she couldn't relieve herself in that state and ended up soiling herself. Later, Kazuki confessed to her that she relies heavily on Amane. The teacher plans to leave the next day and hopes to be able to get out, but Kazuki is willing to sacrifice the entire group to save Amane. The 9th day arrived, and they had to search for resources because the teacher took a lot with him. The following day, Amane took notes on what was happening, and Kazuki noticed that one of the girls had worms in her wound. The girl was in bad condition despite the wound closing, but the girl who couldn't move wanted to die. Kazuki and Amane felt sorry for her because the girl believed she would never be able to repay the favor. Another day passed, and one of the girls had gone insane. The teacher didn't return after more than 2 days. They started sleeping more to endure the hunger, and while sleeping, they forgot about the agony. One of the girls' dog died, and Kazuki suggested cooking it because it was the only thing they could eat. Kazuki took charge of dissecting the animal to be able to cook it. Everyone ate, but they didn't feel well. The 13th day arrived, and the girl with blood poisoning had convulsions, while the girl who had gone insane was even worse. One girl couldn't respond anymore, and the other was dying from blood poisoning. Kazuki was the only one who still maintained composure. The 14th day arrived, and they were very hungry. Kazuki talked to Amane about Yuuji and wanted them to meet. The teacher appeared, but he had gone insane, and the girl who couldn't move died. Everyone was getting worse, and Amane started crying. The 15th day arrived, and the girl with blood poisoning died, and the one who had convulsions committed suicide. suicide. One of the girls ate the worms from her wounds due to her madness. They all thought that if someone died, someone else might survive. The teacher caught a deer, and they were able to eat. Kazuki wasn't feeling well and didn't eat. At night, the teacher and the student council president wanted to leave, so they followed them without being seen by the others. Kazuki took Amane to where the two of them were, and the teacher was having a relationship with the person in charge. They even cooked one of the girls. Amane got scared and made a noise, so they had to escape. Amane still couldn't believe the situation. The teacher attacked them, but Kazuki defended Amane. They crossed paths with another girl who had also gone insane. It seemed like they were the only two left who hadn't lost their minds, so they wanted to escape, but Amane couldn't handle everything. Kazuki calmed her down, and they continued running, but Amane was overwhelmed by fear and couldn't go on. She thought about committing suicide. Kazuki prepared provisions for Amane to escape and was going to give her time to escape. In this way, she convinced Amane to leave on her own. Kazuki had probably died in a very painful way, but Amane could only see her smiling as she escaped. Amane lost track of time in the forest and started hallucinating about her deceased classmates, including those who hadn't gone insane. As a result, she collapsed, but she was on the road in a field full of lettuce, and she was able to survive. When she returned to school, everyone accused her of eating the others despite not having done anything. She dreamed about the girls who died, and Amane felt that she deserved punishment to survive. So, Amane confessed everything to Yuuji and wanted to replace Kazuki's place and didn't feel affection for him. However, after getting closer to him, she truly fell in love and felt that she didn't deserve that happiness and thought that the only option was for Yuuji to kill her. He scolded her for that and asked her to stop apologizing. He wanted her to stop trying to replace Kazuki. Yuuji asked her if she loved him, and Amane said yes. After that, Yuuji told her that everyone has a painful past and regrets. Maybe he can't forget it, but since she wants to die, he asked her to live for him until death. Yuuji wanted her by his side, and Amane started crying, but he asked her to stop crying. He accepted her because it's the only way he won't allow himself to die. And he will forgive Amane even if the rest of the world doesn't. Thus, the day will come when she can forgive herself. In addition, Yuuji believes that his sister is still alive. She planned to let Amane escape alone. Despite everything, they bought offerings for Kazuki, but a man on the street appeared to harass both of them. He was obsessed with Amane's case, and Yuuji was on guard. After that, they headed to the forest where all that madness had happened and dug where Amane had left things. She left a letter for Amane, stating that everyone died from an illness. It was all because of Hiroka's body, the girl who couldn't move, which they had cooked. Kazuki has a request, and it is that if Yuuji suffers, he helps her. She sees him as her little brother whom she must protect. Kazuki had possibly escaped from the place, although it is unknown if she is still alive. In the area, they made a path so that people wouldn't get lost in the forest again. Amane apologized at the graves of all those who died there. Suddenly, they received a call from Makina. But that crazy person we mentioned before was the manager's father and wanted revenge against Amane. That man appeared out of nowhere and pulled out a shotgun, forcing them to put on student uniforms. On their way back, Yuuji requested help from the place where he worked to avoid problems with the police regarding Yumiko's case. The man didn't hesitate to shoot at the forces, and that's when Yuuji arrived with Amane, who understood what Yuuji was doing. The protagonist planned to shoot this crazy person from 900 meters away. He communicated in Morse code with Makina to direct the crazy person to his shooting range. In this way, the crazy person took them to the bathroom, and the protagonist had a chance to shoot. The crazy person then took them back to the classroom where the others were. Amane entered now, with the aim of making the crazy person go to the bathroom, thus being within the protagonist's sight. However, this man asked Amane to put on her old uniform, and then he wanted to start torturing her. But the girls said it wasn't her fault for what happened. This man intended to abuse Amane. So, he took her to the bathroom, and Yuuji was able to shoot. The bullet grazed his shoulder, and Amane took the opportunity to grab the shotgun. The forces entered and captured the criminal. Amane apologized for everything. Yuuji returned and was happy that everything was fine. Finally, the protagonist felt like just another student. And that's how the first season of this anime ends. If you've reached this part of the video, let me tell you that you've been one of the few people to make it this far. So comment the word Academy in the comments. Remember to subscribe to not miss any videos. With that said, see you in the next video.